Welcome to this meeting of the Council. I am Councillor Keith Scarf, the Chair of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If any member of the public attending the meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately and we will ensure that they are not included in the filming. Members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. May I please request that mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. If you do hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. So we'll move to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Many thanks, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillors Lucy Elkin, Lavinia Haddingham, Sarah Mansell, Janet Pearson, Miles Rowe and Colin Lane.
Thank you. We move to item 2, which is the declarations of interest by councillors. I'm going to start off by declaring that my wife is a landlord and therefore I will declare an interest in the motion item. Are there any further declarations? Councillor Carter first. Try and get you all.
Just declaring, regards motion as well, that I am a council tenant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitehead, I saw you next.
Yeah, just declare I'm a landlord, albeit not in Mid-Suffolk.
Okay. Other members? Councillor Caston?
Thank you, Chair. Declaring that I'm a landlord.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Davies? Okay. Is that all the declarations of interest? Okay. I mean, obviously, if you become aware of any during the meeting, you can declare later on, should you need to do so. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of September, which is paper MC/25/20. Can I request, are there any issues with the accuracy of the minutes? I see no hands. Could I request a proposer for the minutes then, please? Councillor Mellon, and a seconder? Councillor Weller, thank you. I'm going to call for a vote by a show of hands. All those in favour of the minutes, please. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. Item 4 is the Chair's announcements and some slight amendments to that. If I can find the paper. Yes, you've got 4 items on there and it said that the Chair attended all items. I was unable to attend the Baber Chair's service and the Ipswich Mayor's Civic Service as my wife was extremely unwell, and I'm very grateful to the Vice Chair, Councillor Baker, for attending them at extremely short notice. She was only notified on Thursday. Thank you very much, Councillor Baker, for doing that. Just a final reminder, you must be sick to death of me telling you all about it, but anyone who hasn't replied to the Civic Service, if you haven't, doesn't matter, you can still come along. Please, you are welcome. And all those who are coming, look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Thank you. Item 5 then is leaders' announcements. Could I invite Councillor Andy Mellon to present your update?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So here are my announcements, and I will be attending your service if I'm back from Yorkshire in time. So last year, together with Baber, we were named Council of the Year by Public Sector Innovation Experts, IESE, and earlier this month we hosted a visit by representatives of various authorities across the country, which was an opportunity to showcase our continuing work since receiving that award. So the group visited various places in Baber and Mid-Suffolk, which showcased our work, including the development at Gateway 14, Stowmarket Innovation Gateway, and then our investment in affordable housing, community health and wellbeing, arts and culture, and our climate change and biodiversity work. and we got some really good feedback from the IEASY team. One example of innovation is our initiative to make it easier for owners of Grade 2 listed buildings to make their homes more energy efficient. And our district, as you know, has significant numbers of listed properties, but these historic properties often suffer from poor energy performance due to their original features and poorly fitting windows and single glazing. It leads to higher bills for owners, and of course it's costly for the environment too. So working closely with Historic England, we have in the last few weeks introduced a new local listed building consent order, and that we are the first rural councils in the country to successfully achieve this. So if you're the owner of a listed building, or even the landlord of a listed building, you can find out more on our website. And I'd certainly like to pay tribute to my colleague, Councillor Deborah Saw from Baber, who has championed this initiative alongside our own Councillor Andrew Stringer. Now, we also continue to encourage the next generation to tackle climate change, recently hosting our second Schools Green Skills Summit. And this event at the Royal Hospital School saw student delegates from 10 schools across Suffolk discussing real-world issues. And I was pleased to be invited to take part in a question and answer session as part of the day. I hope that the global leaders who are gathering in Brazil for COP30 next month share the same passion for collaboration and collective problem solving as I saw in those students. And can I thank the staff who organised that? It was an excellent day. On the joint local plan, with the government having increased the housing requirements for Mid-Suffolk, it's vital that we work alongside communities and neighbouring councils to plan what is being asked of us. And as councillors will know, we will shortly start preparation of our new local plan. This is the blueprint for future development that ensures communities have sufficient housing, employment and investment, and that environment and heritage is protected with the right infrastructure in place. So we've joined with some of our neighbouring councils to conduct a call for sites, which launched on Monday. We're inviting residents, developers and landowners to submit locations which could be considered for planned future development for housing, employment, sports and leisure or community purposes. And there's more information on our website. Lastly, in addition to the tabled wording, because of the significant changes to waste coming in next year, I'm creating a full cabinet role for recycling and waste. And I'm very happy to appoint Councillor Dave Penny to this role. And also recently appointed Councillor Jen Over as the lead member for sustainable travel. That was announced at the last cabinet, and I just want to remind folk of that today. Those are my announcements, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Are there any points of clarification required by councillors? I see none. Thank you very much. So we move to item 6, which is petitions.
Thank you, Chair. None received.
Item 7, questions by the public.
Also none received.
And item 8, questions by councillors.
None received.
Thank you. We move now to then item 9, which is the Community Governance Review 2025, and this is paper MC/25/22. Could I invite David Connors to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the purpose of the report is for the Council to approve a district-wide community governance review. We have received a number of inquiries from parishes within the district around changes to their governance processes that would require community governance reviews. An option could be taken to carry out specific reviews for those councils should they submit the formal request as legally is required to do so. However, it is deemed more efficient and best practice for us to offer this as an opportunity to all parishes, to use it as an opportunity for them to review their governance structures. And therefore the recommendations in the report are for the council to approve for a district-wide community governance review to take place, with the terms of reference outlined in Appendix A. To task the Community Governance Review Working Group to conduct the review, I'd like to draw attention to recommendation 3.3 that was agreed at the first working group meeting, is that it's recommended that Council retains the right apologies, 3.4, that Council retains the right to approve the draft recommendations and before they go out to consultation. And finally, for the monitoring officer to ensure that delegations are properly recorded within the Council's governance framework for the review to take place. I'd just like to point to note that in Appendix A at 3.2 and at 10.3, there are two minor typos. These have been corrected in the terms of reference that will go out to publication.
Okay. Thank you, David. Can I request a proposer? Councillor Weller and Councillor Warboys, you're prepared to second? Or do you? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll now invite questions from councillors. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was just a quick question about the areas, the parishes that are excluded from the review, which obviously includes Thurston in my ward. I just wanted to double check, are they aware that they won't have an opportunity to be participating in the review? And if so, do they have any issues with that? Just to double check that we haven't missed anything. Thank you.
Yes, certainly not a problem. Yes, all parish councils were written to in May, so I'm aware that the period for parish councils to get their requests in is quite short. However, we have sent out communication to every parish council in May, indicating that this report would be coming to council and indicating what the terms of reference would be, and in that was agreed those areas that were unfortunately that are excluded as a result of previous CGRs that have taken place.
Okay. Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. It's not clear to me in the recommendations, and maybe it's just my misunderstanding. Does the council have the final say in approval of the recommendations following the review?
Yes, certainly. So I can explain that. So once the requests come in from the parish council, they will then be reviewed by the Community Governance Working Group and go out to the first consultation. As a result of the response of those consultations, the Community Governance Working Group will then form the draft recommendations with a proposed consultation strategy, and it is those draft recommendations that will then come to full council for approval by full council. Then, following the publication of the final recommendations, full council will need to approve the any restructure orders that need to be put in place.
Further questions? Okay, I'll open the item up for debate. Just a reminder, you have 3 minutes per speaker. Would anyone like to open the debate? Wow, a marked reluctance. Okay, well, I will conclude that we don't wish to have a debate then, so I will therefore straight away go to ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks, can I take your vote verbally? For. Councillor Morgan? For. No problem.
Councillor Carter?
For. Thank you, members. There's 28 votes for. That motion is carried.
So we now move to item 10, which is the Licensing Act 2003, the Statement of Licensing Policy for the 5-yearly revision. This is paper MC/25/23. Could I invite Councillor Weller to introduce the report and to move the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to do this. I'm happy to introduce the Council's revised Statement of Licensing Policy 2026-2031. And we've got Director of Operations Mark Ems and Kate Pearsall from the licensing team here to respond to any specific question from members that I'm not able to answer. And I'd particularly like to thank Kate and her team for their diligence in producing this paper and delivering the revised policy. The Licensing Act of 2003 requires local authorities to publish a written statement of licensing policy, which must be formally reviewed every 5 years. On the 8th of May, the revised policy was considered by the Council's Licensing and Regulatory Committee, who agreed it should be subject to a 6-week consultation prior to progress to full Council today. The consultation was carried out in accordance with the Licensing Act requirements, and the statutory consultees included the police, fire and rescue service, public health, as well as licence holders, and the consultation was supported by a social media campaign. No objections or representations were received in response to that consultation. We recognise the value and importance of the licensed trade to the local economy, ensuring our district provides a welcoming experience to visitors and opportunities for residents to meet in convivial surroundings, whether they're a restaurant, a pub, a community centre or a village hall. But we also have to balance those interests with the 4 key objectives of the Act, primarily to prevent crime and disorder, to ensure public safety, to look at prevention of public nuisance, and to protect children from harm. The policy was last reviewed in 2021, and the key changes are summarised in Appendix B of the report. These relate primarily to 3 areas. National planning policy. Existing licensees shouldn't have unreasonable restrictions placed upon them as a result of development permitted after they were established. Legal duties under the Equalities Act, providing a focus for an approach towards violence against women and girls, which is a key policing priority for Suffolk, and incorporating the Ask Angela initiative, drink spiking and incident reporting. And public safety, reflecting, among other things, Martin's Law, which is also known as the Terrorism Prevention of Premises Act, which strengthens the security of public premises and events following the sad death of Martin Hett in the Manchester Arena attack. The Council team works hard to develop effective working relationships with licence holders, and this has led to very good compliance. Pleasingly, in the course of the last year, we've had 4 new premises licence granted, including Cedars Pantry in Weatheringset, which is very popular with cyclists and does very good quality coffee. I would tell Councillor Mansell that she's not here, but hopefully she's watching. The Tesco Express at Great Blakenham has also been granted a licence. Denham Village Hall and the award-winning Walsham Llewellows Sports Club. So I'm also happy to report that we've had no licences surrendered. So I'm happy to propose the adoption of the revised policy and seek a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I request a second? Councillor Walters.
Thank you. Happy to second, and I'll reserve my right to speak.
Okay. Thank you. I will now invite questions. Wow. Oh, Councillor Caston, you're going to help us out there.
Thank you. When we talk about merging the 2 licensing policies with Baber and Mid-Suffolk, I don't know if Baber have a no casinos policy or not. They might do, but if they don't, how will that match up? You might not know the policy of Baber District Council.
Chair, with your permission, I'll ask Kate Pearsall if she's happy to answer that one, because I'm not absolutely cited on the Baber position.
Thank you. Yeah, there's currently no casino policy in either local authority areas because there's no, the government has restricted casinos to certain areas and one of them is not Mid-Suffolk or Baber, so there currently is no opportunity to apply for a casino in either Baber or Mid-Suffolk due to government legislation which is covered under the Gambling Act as opposed to the Licensing Act.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the inclusion of the right that new developments cannot impinge on the fact of established licensed premises, and I really welcome this. Unfortunately, in my ward, we have incidents of new residents, if you like, moving into the area, moving next door to licensed premises, and then creating a right or hoo-ha and restricting those licensed premises in their activities. Can we, I notice this is now complete, but I would ask at future reviews if it could be considered that the wording be adopted to include new residents moving next to, because if it moves like next to one, like I live next to two, I know that's the issue, so I shouldn't complain. Thank you.
To help me out with a detail. I mean, I think when a license is granted, then I'm not sure whether you're talking about new development next to a licensed premises or new people moving into existing neighbours, if you like. So I think it's down to, it's a case of buyer beware, isn't it? And make your own research when you're moving into a premises, when you're moving into a property, whether you're a commercial property or residential property, to make, as part of your own due diligence before moving in, establish who it is you're moving next to. And I'm not sure that a further revised policy needs to make particular reference to those type of measures that you'd hope a reasonable person would make before taking on a tenancy or moving into an adjacent property to a licensee. Happy to take a...
I would just have to say, well, okay, due diligence may be the case, but the way this is balanced, if you can move into an area next to a licensed premises, knowing that you can then create a hoo-ha by saying it's creating a disturbance, for instance. And so you can do your due diligence and you can put the pub out of business or licensed premises out of business. And you've strengthened it now. To me, there's no difference between new premises being built and new residents moving in, trying to change the pro rata. So I think, to me, the two is very similar. Thank you.
I can see Kate Pearsall champing at the bit to come in on something that I've clearly missed. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, no, I just wanted to clarify it would be taken on a case by case. So if we did have new residents move in next to a premises and then they did have concerns with the licensed premises, we wouldn't immediately take action just on the case of someone making a complaint. We would work with the resident, we'd work with the public house or whatever licensed premise it may be, and there would have to be evidence there to suggest that there is an issue. So we do work with licensees, members of public as well, and make sure that it's dealt with case by case so that the appropriate action is taken. I don't know if that assists.
Thanks. Out of interest, these statements, they last for several years, and every time we have a revision, we need to make sure that that's thorough and complete, which I'm sure it is. It looks very thorough. Obviously, be comparing this to the Licensing Act. Has there been any comparison work done with other local authority statements? Because obviously every 5 years, that's a while before a new version. Just wondered if any of that has been looked at.
I'm happy for Kate to have a stab at that, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. With all policies, it tends to be good practice just to see what other local authority areas are doing. And a lot of the changes were based on the government statutory guidance. That's one of the main changes that we look at to make sure that we're in line with the statutory guidance and all best practice. Of course, each policy is unique to our area, but we certainly do look at other local authorities to make sure we're at a good level and setting a good standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The violence against women and girls part of this, where we're talking about safe spaces and drink spiking, will every venue that we have a licence for be asked to do this, or is this something that we'll introduce where we think there's a risk or where there's been previous problems?
If you're happy for Kate to answer that.
Yes, again, we'd like to look at things at case by case, and that's what our policy sets out, is that we would risk rated premises. If, for example, it's a nightclub, we would expect provisions to be put into place. If it's a village premises, then perhaps the requirements wouldn't need to be as thorough as for a nightclub. So it would be case by case, and it is best practice. And any new applicants, they would offer up measures and conditions to promote the 4 objectives, and that's something we would look at. So the policy encourages applicants and current licence holders to look at those measures and assess whether or not they need to implement them. And of course we work with all the other responsible authorities, such as the police, to make sure that premises are carrying out good practice.
Okay. Before I take any further questions, can I just ask, could councillors speak to the microphones, because there is a little bit of a problem with some members actually hearing what is said, and up here I can hear very little of what is said. So if you can speak clearly, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Given this statement runs from 2026 to 2031, and given local government reorganisation and the fact that perhaps Mid-Suffolk and Baber could be sliced and diced various ways, will this policies go by parish, or what will happen in April 28? Thank you.
Largely on the basis that I didn't hear the question, I'm going to ask Kate to answer it.
I mean, at this moment in time, I'm not entirely sure how that would look. I mean, we do have regular meetings with our neighbours, so West Suffolk, Ipswich and so on. So we try and make sure we're on par with each other. So, but I couldn't answer how that would work in the future with the policy and how we would look. Unfortunately, at this stage, I couldn't answer that.
Thank you. I think that's not the only example of LGR problems that we face in the future, but it does raise the issue of how difficult it is to deal with LGR and the splitting up of districts in particular. Okay, are there any other questions? Right, I'll open it up for debate. Who would like to begin the debate? Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I absolutely welcome this. We've reviewed it just like we should. I think the licensing committee and officers have done a really good job with this. When I first looked at this, I worried whether this was going to be a whole load of red tape for our village pubs that have got enough to deal with already, and I don't believe that it is. I think it's there to prevent crime and disorder. There's a little bit more about protecting women, and I think we're getting nicely up to date with that. On another note, I think our taxi licensing policy isn't up for review, but with LGR round the corner, I do wonder whether if there should be plans to look at that in a similar way before it's actually the statutory time we need to review it. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Yes, Councillor Matheson.
Yes, just to introduce a point of etc. That the going through LGR, the licence on that pub will still be the licence on that pub, and I think that's just common sense. Which I've transferred from the planning regime that Councillor Stringer explained to me how that would work very similarly with neighbourhood plans. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other speakers, I'll call on Councillor Walters. You reserved your right to speak.
Thanks, Chair. So I just want to extend a big thank you to Kate and the licensing team. And also fellow members of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee. We looked hard at the revisions, and they went away and diligently came back with great proposals. As a licensee, personal licence holder, and operating 2 premises licences, I understand how important it is and take on board all the comments that have been made here today. So it is really important that we have these policies in place, I strongly urge you to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, if there are no other speakers, no. Okay, I will now ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks, can I take a vote verbally? For Councillor Morgan? Got it on there. Councillor Carter? For. Councillor Marriott, are you having difficulty with your laptop? You're sorted. Councillor, that is 28 votes for. That's carried.
Item 12 then is the State of the District Report 2025. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Item 11 is the Biodiversity Net Gain Monitoring Fees and Habitat Bank Brokerage and Fees. This was a reissued paper, MC/25/24, so you should have received that within your table papers. However, the appendices are the same as you would have received in the original pack. Could I ask Councillor Andrew Stringer to introduce the report and to move the recommendations? Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Introducing report MC/25/24. Before I start, we have an amendment to the tabled paper. At page 9, we need to delete the words up to in category 2 and in category 3. Because once you're up to a figure in category 1, you're already there. So with that, I will continue. You'll see that this is a tabled paper, and therefore it contains a small number of amendments in relation to the Habitat Bank brokerage service that I will summarise for you shortly. This report addresses two connected issues on our 30-year biodiversity net gain monitoring duties, and to explain why monitoring charges considered necessary to offset our costs associated with these responsibilities. It will ask councils to approve the principle of charging monitoring fees. The report sets out the rationale for the proposed charging structure. You can see that we are recommending the adoption of 4 separate fees based on the size of the development, and the background of these charges is set out in the report. And upon their adoption, for committee to note that these fees will be added to the existing planning fees and charges schedule. Finally, it will ask committee to delegate authority to the Director of Place to review the schedule of charges and to amend the schedule in consultation with both myself and Sally Davis, portfolio holder in Baber, to reflect current good practice in B&G charging. Biodiversity net gain monitoring responsibilities only arise in 2 instances. Firstly, in cases where the net gain is delivered away from the development site, so-called off-site net gain, and secondly, where the net gain is delivered on site, but there will be an impact on significant habitat creation or protection. These requirements are mandatory aspects of our biodiversity net gain duties. Other categories of biodiversity net gain outcome are not subject to these monitoring requirements. Monitoring intervals are then set typically at years 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 25, 25 and 30, where we'll need to review reports and in some instances undertake site inspections so we can have full confidence that planned enhancements are indeed taking place. The report explains how we've calculated the fee structure. The proposal would see 4 separate charges imposed based on the size of the development. These range from £11,326 for minor developments up to £37,809 for large strategic developments of more than 200 houses. We're proposing that this is paid as a lump sum when the Section 106 agreement is signed. the exception being developments which come forward in different phases over a number of years. In these instances, we will give the developer the option of paying up front so he can collect the fee as the development progresses. It is unprecedented for a council duty to last for 30 years. The type of predictions about how cost today will grow over time isn't the easiest of assessments to undertake. We have, as you can see, used a biodiversity monitoring fee calculator tool developed by a specialist ecological company called Verna to base our cost predictions. The same approach has been used in a number of other councils. What is especially useful about this calculator is we can input actual staff salary costs, corporate overheads and inflation, as well as building in monitoring and non-monitoring years. We have then estimated the amount of time we think our officers will spend undertaking the duty. We've assumed the need for more checks and balances for larger and more complex sites, and this has enabled us to create our 4 distinct fees for minor, major, large major and strategic developments. We've also had a close look at other council approaches. Some have used the same Verna calculator, others have created their own. Some councils have more categories, a few have built models that are candidly difficult to follow. Our fee proposals are broadly in line with our neighbours and other councils, using the same model. What is the consistent theme throughout is the importance of making the assessment based on as many known costs as possible. This is the approach we have taken. The second part of the report highlights the role of habitat banks, and in this aspect includes some minor changes, as I've already indicated. A habitat bank is a site where habitats are created, restored or enhanced to generate biodiversity units, which is a standard metric used to assess the biodiversity value of a site. That can be sold to developers to offset the environmental impact for their development. For a habitat bank provider to trade in biodiversity units, the land must also be registered on the Natural England Offsite Biodiversity Gain Site Register. To register the landowner must also have a legal agreement, a Section 106 agreement, with the council to make similar arrangements through a conservation covenant with a responsible body. There are no habitat banks or responsible bodies within the district at present, which means any off-site biodiversity compensation will not be achieved locally as it sits at the moment, but things are obviously going to change, we think, in the relatively near future. The amendments in the table paper seek to place greater emphasis not only on the Council's Biodiversity and Trees supplementary planning document, location hierarchy, which established a clear expectation that applicants must prioritise the delivery of biodiversity net gain off-site based on a location hierarchy. This should foremost be prioritised within the districts or the wider Norfolk and Suffolk local nature recovery strategy area. This has already been set out in paragraph 7.2 of the report. The report now provides more clarity on the justification for the Creating a Habitat Bank brokerage service, because such a service would help mitigate the risk that off-site biodiversity net gain delivery can now only be achieved outside the district. The purpose of a Habitat Bank brokerage service is therefore about how we raise awareness and inform landowners on the process of creating habitat banks so that communities local to the development benefit from those increases in biodiversity. It's therefore very much in the Council's interest to develop this offer. Officers therefore believe precise guidelines for regulating habitat banks within the districts should be introduced. This will help to manage some of the informal inquiries officers receive to help potential applicants navigate the various stages of the process required to meet the DEFRA resignation standard. It would also introduce the checks and balances needed to deliver the best ecological outcomes for our districts and ensure the Council is confident to enter into an agreement to secure the land for the next 30 years. We're asking committee to approve the work underway to develop a habitat bank brokerage service, specifically to approve the principle of a charging fee for this service, delegate to the Director of Place in consultation with myself and Sally Davis the authority to agree the detailed fee arrangements and to amend them as good practice indicates. In doing so, we'll work closely with both Head of Climate and Nature Recovery and both Cabinet members on climate change and biodiversity and nature recovery. And Mid-Suffolk's lead on, and Tim Weller, Mid-Suffolk's lead on environment. Thank goodness that's not a long sentence. Environment, culture and well-being. And to establish the principles and procedures and requirements for securing off-site biodiversity net gain land and locations, the relevant criterion for suitability and the legal arrangements to secure such land to deliver off-site biodiversity net gain. I therefore would like to move the recommendation which is in the papers and ask for a seconder. I'd also like, as I'm closing this part of it, I'd like to thank David Clark and the rest of the team for all the work on this document. It's not been an easy thing to pull together because we've got several strands we need to get to, and we need to get this right, obviously not just for the near future, but for over 3 decades. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. A seconder, Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second this report and speak to it now, if I may. Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to thank David Clark and the planning team for your great work on this proposal. Thank you very much. This charging fee structure is a real essential step to unlocking off-site biodiversity net gain where it applies to development sites in our district. We all know and understand that land use change and urbanisation have been main drivers of habitat degradation and loss historically in our country and around the world. BNG is not a panacea as such, but it can provide really good opportunities to redress some of the impacts from development at the very beginning, hopefully, of the planning process. Well, firstly, it incentivises developers to protect trees and other habitat features on site and minimise harm, and that's what we want to do. We want to minimise harm in the first place. So we can incorporate these in the plans instead of removing them. But most developers will and currently do opt for on-site mitigation, and this option is prioritised by the BNG policy, and it mitigates for the ecological consequences of habitat loss where it occurs on a development site. It could potentially provide more green space for our residents to enjoy. However, where developments in mid-Suffolk require off-site mitigation, we really are keen to ensure that there are plenty of opportunities to create new habitats and boost wildlife here in our district and situate these off-site mitigation sites as close as possible to the development site that may have been impacted. I think it's really exciting that we are looking at having a habitat bank brokerage service that will be able to advise on the best and most suitable sites that can deliver the best outcomes ecologically for our district. They will be able to offer advice and support to local landowners and help them to register their land for BNG, which I think is really key at this point. It's really timely. Whilst we do not currently have any BNG sites in mid-Suffolk, I think that this and other actions that are coming along will really help to catalyse that activity of getting those sites registered. Replicating structures and the complexities of natural ecosystems is incredibly difficult. So off-site offsetting needs to be really well designed and needs to ensure that the resulting ecosystem is resilient and delivers the best ecological outcomes over the lifespan of the project. And I think this is another key thing about the habitat brokerage service. But we also need to appreciate that this monitoring fee is really important too. It plays a key role to ensure that offset produces those benefits for nature recovery. And the fee structure in this paper provides the resource needed to cover the monitoring activity and report writing to support long-term management over that 30 years. So the approach taken here is the result of reviewing best practice from other councils, and I have every confidence that the proposals outlined in this work are going to do the best to bring BNG forward. And I ask the council to support and approve this work, please. Thank you very much.
Questions? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to point 4.6 and section 5 when it's talking about the monitoring over the long period. I note in here that there doesn't seem to be any provision for sort of finance. Whenever you've got a long-term project and there's an income derived from that, if that income is not protected or restricted, it can often, as the years go on, get sort of absorbed and lost. So if we're wanting to make sure that this monitoring takes place, and this sort of scheme can carry on and you're carrying on to derive income, that money, I would suggest, needs to be kind of ring-fenced. It needs to have some kind of restriction on it so that it is there for the pot moving forward year on year. Because I'm very aware at the end of every year with budgets, things get swallowed up, they get moved on. So there's no mention or provision in there for that, and I wondered if that was possible at this time.
Yeah, I would imagine that similar to SIL, there'll have to be a ring-fence budget for that to sit in, because if it wasn't in a ring-fence budget, those that paid it could clearly ask for it back if it wasn't there. But I will defer to David Clark to answer fully.
Thank you. The money will be set aside. It will be identified within the budget. It will be protected for the purposes for which it's been collected.
Okay. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, question. I think the 30-year period of monitoring is fine. I think that habitat and biodiversity can get themselves really well established in 30 years. However, I'm wondering if there is anything in there or that we can put in there that would protect habitat and landscape that's established from removal, because I recall a case in point in Stowmarket where trees suddenly were being bulldozed out and disappeared, and when I looked into it, it turned out that it was 30 years and a week, more or less, since the development had taken place and that the trees had been planted, and that actually had further consequences because having removed them, it was then argued that the visually important open space, which was next to the landscape, wasn't really worthwhile anyway, and we finished up with some more houses stuck on there instead, which surely was not the original purpose. So can we do anything more to stop that happening beyond 30 years?
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. I think the legislation only allows us to go up to 30 years. I normally look about 2 weeks ahead. I don't find in my life I can look much further than that. Now, I think, not being glib, I think we've gone as far as we possibly can go with this. But of course, don't forget the instance you talk about. That framework was in a framework where you didn't have to show biodiversity net gain when you were developing. So if you think forward, and we hope that quite a lot of land has had its biodiversity increase significantly, if that bit of land now needs to be built on by someone, well, if they've then got to show biodiversity net gain, they're starting from a very, very high plateau, and frankly, you wouldn't want to start there, you'd want to start somewhere else. So I think, I can't be 100% certain, Councillor Matheson, but I think because we now have to do biodiversity net gain, and should that continue, and I certainly hope it will, I think the worst excesses should be metered out.
Yes, like you said.
Councillor Patchett next, and then Councillor Lawrence, and then Winch.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to steal a question that John Whitehead brought out on the last one, which is LGR. So bringing out this policy is great, but will it disappear in 2 years' time, or is this monitoring, is it ring-fenced in to the geographical location of mid-Suffolk, much like the joint local plans? And some of the things we brought in have been ring-fenced to mid-Suffolk. So I guess if I'm someone that's paying for all these years of ongoing monitoring, but a subsequent authority comes in and says, well, yeah, we don't need this, so we're going to get rid of the monitorers, and we're going to get rid of this service. So then does the person who paid us this money then actually have some financial recourse to come back to them because we can no longer provide them that service? Thank you.
Like with all things, if it's locked into a legal document within the planning permission, the land will still be there. The parties that are the named parties in that can change and they can be amended. Right? If you own a home that's had a Section 106 agreement on it, I do, if and when I ever sell it, the names attached to that document will then have to be changed or revised if it's not then extant. So in a similar way, it should endure into whatever successor authorities or no authorities. It may go into a charitable organisation that oversees this, or a non-governmental organisation. Who knows? It could do. But the legal agreement and the land will not be moving. So it should be sustainable over that period, whoever's in charge. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
All I can say is thank goodness that I won't be around in 40 years' time. What I find quite disturbing is at the moment, whenever we consider solar farms in the planning committee, they're sold, inverted commas, to us as temporary installations. And part of that is that land will be returned back to good agricultural farmland, maybe improved agricultural farmland, because it's been left for 40 years. Part of those solar farms is introduction of hedges and biological net gain. So here now we have another policy come in. They won't be able to take those hedges away necessarily because we have a different policy. So I think we have to be very careful with being sold solar cells and solar farms and all the net gain from the hedges there. And in 40 years' time, when you take them away, it'll be in contravention of this policy. Oh, sorry, I thought it was debate. My apologies. My apologies. No.
Yeah, can I just clarify something about on-site BNG? So my understanding, if there's no special habitat, then there isn't a charge, which is good because it would encourage a developer to go on site. But if there's no monitoring, how do we know that that on-site BNG is ever delivered? What's the answer to that question from a resident?
It's the normal way that we regulate any planning permission. But they also, even some individual dwellings can have Section 106s if they're putting that as part of their mitigation or they're promising that's going to be enhanced. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was simply thinking of small developers, small builders. Is there a lower limit to the amount of properties required to make a developer take part in this scheme? Thank you.
This scheme, there isn't a lower limit, it goes from 0 to, but if you were a small SME builder, I would imagine you probably will not need this service because you will normally be putting this biodiversity on your site. Because you'd need to be talking about quite dense development or a particular circumstance where you couldn't deliver an uplift in biodiversity net gain on your existing site. It sort of plays into, if you turn most fields, agricultural fields, into a housing estate, even if you do very little, you're upping biodiversity net gain. That's not because concrete's really good for wildlife, it's just that current agricultural fields are very denuded of wildlife and biodiversity. So there's a whole issue about if you develop, it isn't actually hugely difficult to up biodiversity net gain on your development site. And from small SME builders, that should be really, really simple to do. And of course, with the wonderful work that Suffolk and Norfolk County Council have done on their nature recovery strategy, that should have a live mapping tool there that will help SME builders to look at where their land is and what are the biodiversity opportunities in that area. So actually, I think when that comes on stream as well, coupled that to neighbourhood plans as well, I think will be the whole biodiversity thing should only be not only be more forensic and more important, but actually easier to achieve. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious this might be a similar sort of question, but quite coincidentally, earlier this week, I overheard someone who's basically putting a new dwelling for a family on their fairly large plot. And at the time, they were sort of complaining about the various fees they're having to pay. £700 here, I think one was £900 for biodiversity report. And basically, they were told there was zero biodiversity on the site, but they started to demonstrate 10% net gain. So they were complaining about the principle there, but it's the same question. Is there a de minimis one where, is there any conceivable way where someone does a modest building on a plot for family could end up paying 11,000 plus for this survey?
Well, I think technically the answer is yes, you could, but I think that would be an extremely a complete one-off, and the amount of development they'd have to do on that plot to not be able to raise the biodiversity would basically be concrete in everything up to every boundary. You know, we aren't talking about, you know, penalising most of what if you look at some of the conditions we've already had, some of the works that people have been, it's simple things like planting hedges and putting the right boxes up, etc., etc. None of these things are high value items, but it's about respecting what you have got. So if you have got a pond that happens to have great crested newts or something, it doesn't stop the development. It means you have to respect that you've got to work around that and take account of that. So I think, yes, and it is a lot to have surveys can be expensive, although in my own findings in this, there are an awful lot of local ecologists that I think are actually very reasonable for what they charge. So my advice would be shop around, because we do have a number of them here in our part of Suffolk, and they're very good quality in what they do, and actually I think very cost effective. So if you are a small SME or a small one-off, I think it's, but then again, it's what price do we put on biodiversity? Yet we have had a radical decline in biodiversity in this country, and we either do something about it or we don't, and our grandchildren then won't have that, you know, that biodiversity that we remember when we were younger. Thank you.
Any further questions before I open it up for debate? Okay, we'll open up the debate then. Who would like to begin the debate? Councillor Winch and then Councillor Bradbury.
So I think this is a good paper. We clearly need to introduce monitoring fees, and I'd expect every local authority who's responsible for planning in the country to do so. You can always argue about the exact fee structure, but this seems a very sensible start. The brokerage is a really good idea, and we need to create an ecosystem in the local area. I just wanted to say a general point about BNG being as close to the development site as possible, and I understand at the moment most of our BNG is on site. But if I look on government websites and some planning websites, there's a general view that the BNG market's going to become a lot more sophisticated, and that it doesn't matter where BNG is delivered, and in fact it might even be better targeted in other areas of the country. And that's something that really is a bit of a no-no for me. And the reason for that is if we want our communities to accept the fact there's going to be a lot more housing development, we need to make sure that we can say to them, when you do that, the BNG will be upped and it will happen in the area in which you live. So I want to encourage us to do anything we can do to create the ecosystem near where the development is taking place and within the district as far as we possibly can.
Thank you. I'd just like to perhaps state that I will be supporting this, but I'd like to use an example of Thurston, where there's been, well, very few good words said about the developments that were put in there, and how that would apply if they're going to be built today. And I think all the developments there were built on open fields, and the biodiversity net gain that I can see has improved on all those particular sites. I mean, where I live, for example, there are additional trees, bat boxes, bird boxes, hedgehog holes, and I don't think, even in a large development like where I live, it's about 200 houses, that this particular motion wouldn't really apply. So I should have been a question, but I'd just like to perhaps clarify that. Apologies, but that's, I will be supporting it, but it doesn't seem to apply to areas like Thurston with big developments.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask that there is a line put in this document or somewhere in relation to the restricted income and the provision to carry forward this pot year on year. And I know we feel it's sort of standard practice. We've got a lot of change coming up. Budget managers do move around. When we've got local government reform and things all merging, it's going to easily be lost in translation. So I would encourage some kind of a line just to ensure that that's there, because I can see someone getting in a pickle in a few years' time.
Councillor Stringer, would you be prepared to accept that?
Well, I don't mind. It would be helpful to spoke to officers to see where is this going to live, as it were. I take it the public will be able to see where this is racking up, I take it. I take it will be hosted on some kind of web-based thing, not dissimilar to our SIL or Section 106s or something like that. Well, it will be a 106, so actually it will be there. Sorry. It's already taken care of. It will be there. The amount of money that's been lodged. So actually, all that will need to be is there be a line on a budget, like we have many, many lines on our budget, it just says that's where that money is. And obviously it will be drawn down, as we do the monitoring, and it will gradually whittle down, and then more will come in. So I would imagine it will be one of those fluid things. It will just have to be a line on a budget. But there are many lines on our budgets that are ring-fenced that don't, but yeah, I don't think we necessarily have to have, I mean, I'm happy to amend things, but I think we can, perhaps there's a review built into the papers that the portfolio holders have to make sure the fees are correct. Why don't we let it go through the first cycle so that we're both the same, because obviously Baber hasn't had this change to their policy. Why don't we let it go through one cycle and see where it ends up with, and see if you feel that's then visible enough, and we'll make sure that it does become visible. Okay? Is that okay?
Thank you. Tom Barker is going to make a little bit of a clarification for members' reassurance, I think.
Just to read, Councillor Stringer is absolutely correct. This money would be ring-fenced and safeguarded in exactly the same way as all other monies that are collected via Section 106 legal agreements. So it would have that protection already built in terms of it being ring-fenced for delivery for these purposes.
Thank you. That's very useful. Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much. I will vote for this because I think this is the best thing we've got at the moment, and it is an improvement. But what really worries me is I think moving BNG further afield or the other side of Mid-Suffolk should be a very last resort, because we've the residents are losing that biodiversity, but mainly like the biodiversity is there for a reason. It's chosen that area with its connection to wetlands and its its particular things that it gives off. Like there's some really good benefits with bee food, bird food that can benefit straight away, and you can see huge BNG increases within 2 years with those. But there's also the fact that we call certain things irreplaceable, but there's things like hedgerows, ancient hedgerows, leaf litter that's been decomposing for like hundreds of years. There's long-term unploughed land that just can't be replaced with something else the other side of the district. But I think it is what it is, and in some cases developers really can't deliver that BNG, and it has to be done. But I really think it should be a last resort. Also, it worries me a lot about this 30 years. A lot of these habitats won't be providing as exactly what they need to within that 30 years, and then they could go, or they might go before that, and the legal costs for the council trying to enforce that and trying to deal with it. It does worry me that those legal costs will be considered, and less action will be taken. Like we see with enforcement, sometimes we think this is going to be a massive legal bill. We've got to really think hard about it, and things don't get done very quickly or at all. But no, I'm happy to vote for it. I just do worry about those issues.
Okay. Anyone else wish to join the debate? Okay, I see no hands, so I will move now to ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks, can I take your vote verbally? 4. Councillor Carter? 4. Thank you, members. That is 28 votes for. That motion is carried.
Report 2025, which is paper MC/2525. Can I invite Councillor Andy Mellon to introduce the report and to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. In introducing this report, I'm grateful to the officers who prepared this, and particularly to Joe Hobbs, our Head of Strategic Policy, who has prepared this and is here to support this item. This is our third annual State of the District report, and it's a collation of information and data from a range of sources, particularly from the Suffolk Observatory and the Suffolk Office of Data and Analytics. And we also have reference to the Thriving Places Index, and this uses data from the Office of National Statistics, public health data, the Index of Multiple Deprivation, and many other sources. And that provides a kind of useful triangulation with our local sources of data. So the report now shows that we have around 111,000 residents in Mid-Suffolk. And since 2011, our population has grown by the highest rate of any area in Suffolk by about 14%. That's probably an indication of the level of new house building we've had here. There's some useful data and projections about population on pages 7 to 11 of the report. And on page 130 of our papers, that is, there's a helpful analysis of the challenges of an ageing population. Now, we all know about those challenges, about health and social care and so forth, but actually it's not all bad. There are some benefits to an ageing population, which include things like increased participation in society and civic life, and obviously people bring the benefits of experience and knowledge to workplaces and businesses. Now, page 12 to 19 of the report set out the climate challenge that Mid-Suffolk and Baber face. Now, whilst carbon emissions have gone down, there are some systemic challenges which largely relate to, firstly, our rurality. So there's the need for people to use the private car to access services, employment, education, etc. There are still a huge number of homes that are using heating oil, and we generally have an older housing stock in Mid-Suffolk. But despite these challenges, the emissions are going in the right direction. On pages 22 to 25, we have information from the Community Life Survey, which provides data of community strength and well-being. And there's a really strong statistic in there that 87% of residents are very or fairly satisfied with Mid-Suffolk as a place to live. I hope that applies here. I'm not sure who the 13% are here who maybe don't feel very happy about it, but hopefully we all are in that 87%. And that's well above the national average. And really, it's the top end of the kind of regional average as well. So there's lots of really useful data in here. I'm not going to go into lots and lots of details about the report. There's lots of detail. I recommend it as a really interesting read. And it does serve to support the priorities that we have enshrined in the Mid-Suffolk Plan. And so you'll see the recommendations there. 3.1, to note the Mid-Suffolk State of the District Report 2025. And secondly, to reconfirm our priorities as set out in the Mid-Suffolk Plan. And just to remind us that we did endorse those priorities unanimously last year, so I hope we can do the same with the report now. Thank you, Chair.
Mellon, could I request a seconder for the report? Councillor Hardingham.
Yes, I'm very happy to support this motion. Seconded. Without good data, one cannot make good decisions, so it's a very good tool for use in planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to open it up for questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Baker.
Thank you. Could I ask, could somebody explain sort of the reasons why there is no equality data, why that happens? Is anyone able to explain? It says here on, page 121, data not shown due to limited data being available at district level.
Councillor Mellon, are you able to answer?
If that's okay, I might hand that across to the Head of Strategic Policy to answer that question if you're able to, Jo.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. And so can I just clarify, Councillor Baker, is that page 121 of the reports referring to the Thriving Places Index? I guess, yes. Yeah, the Thriving Places Index, that is a data set that looks at data that is available. It doesn't necessarily use all data available to us, so there is data available around equality, and you know, we regularly access that when we're doing our equality impact assessments on decisions that are made in this chamber. But the Thriving Places Index don't necessarily have that data that they access that they can represent in this report for Mid-Suffolk, so they might have data at a high level for the whole of the Suffolk area or sub-regions of England. So it's more so a statement that Thriving Places Index don't have this data, rather than we don't access it and we don't use it when we fundamentally consider our decisions in this chamber.
Question? Okay, any? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. It might seem like an obvious question, but presumably for the Mid-Suffolk plan itself, obviously that currently runs to 2027. Presumably rather than do a completely new Mid-Suffolk plan for the 11 months that remains, if I can jump on the LGR bandwagon, that will just roll over and we'll continue with that plan till March 2028. Is that right?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Let's see what the spring brings in terms of a decision, and we can go from there. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Caston.
When we have on there the Mid-Suffolk greenhouse gas emissions by sector, we've got one for the waste management. We've got 2014, we had an incinerator built in Great Blakenham, and there doesn't seem to be any change at all to the CO2 produced from waste management. I don't know if the incinerator is taken into consideration for that, or is that just the fact that it didn't change anything?
Councillor Mellon.
Clearly, the situation is going to change next year, and we hope that there's going to be a massive reduction in emissions from that, because there'll be less stuff going into the incinerator. But in terms of the historic data, I'm not sure whether we can give an answer in the meeting or provide it outside.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I don't have that answer for you in the meeting, but I can provide it, as Councillor Mann says, outside the meeting, if that's okay. We can look into that further.
Okay, thank you. So the answer will come to all councillors, obviously, as an answer to the question later on. Any further questions? Okay, I'll open up the debate. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Baker.
Hi, it's me again. Just going back on that point about equality, I can't see that there's any other reference in there to sort of equality, and I would have thought that if the Thriving Places report does not include that we should have made some reference to that as a district. And I can't, I've been going through this and I can't quite see what that is. It's such an important topic for all of the councils and for us also publicly. I think anybody reading that who may have been of a minority group may want some answers to why they may have been excluded.
Yeah, very quickly, just to thank officers for putting this report together. I think it is sometimes useful to step back from the detail and try and get a bigger picture of what's going on. I'm not going to comment on the detail of the report because I think Councillor Mellon gave a very good summary. I am staggered at the population increase forecast for this district in the next 25 years, significantly above the UK average and the rest of Suffolk. It's really something that leaps out from the report, but thanks for your work on this.
I see no others wishing to contribute to the debate, so I will now ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks, can I take your vote verbally? And Councillor Carter, can I take your vote verbally? 4. Thank you, councillors. That is 28 votes for. That is carried.
We've got quite a bit of business to conduct, so I'm going to suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break. So we need to be back for just gone 10 to 7. Can I ask members to be back promptly? Thank you. hear me, I think we should start because we're beyond the time at which I said we would start. Here comes Councillor Richardson now. Good. Okay, so we'll move to item 13 then, which is the timetable of committee meetings 26 to 27, which is paper MC 25/26. Could I invite Councillor Andy Mellon to introduce the report and to move the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very simply, we need to put in place the dates for meetings for the next municipal year. Those are attached as Appendix A, and so the recommendations are that we approve the draft committee timetable and that the Chief Exec calls these meetings in accordance with the agreed timetable, unless, as occasionally happens, there's insufficient business for a meeting to go ahead. But I hope you will support me in putting this in place for the next municipal year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? No. Okay, well, we'll move then straight to the electronic vote. I'll ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress, members. Councillor Hicks and Councillor Carter.
I managed it.
Managed it. Perfect. Must always be two. Councillor Stringer, we haven't registered a vote from you. That is 27 votes for. That is carried.
Which is the appointment of the Independent Remuneration Panel members. This is paper MC/25/27. Could I invite Peter Randall, the Head of Democratic Services, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. As a local authority, we have a duty to maintain an effective and well-populated IRP. This panel makes recommendations around the amendment and setting of member allowances, and members will have seen the biographies of the proposed candidates in Appendix A of the report. David Irvin and Kelly Weston have been recommended as a result of a cross-authority interview panel, and if appointed, this will bring the number of IRP members on the Babe and Mid-Suffolk IRP to the maximum of 5.
Councillor Mellon, and a seconder, Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Are there any questions from members? No. Okay. Do we wish to debate this item? Is there anything we wish to debate? No. Okay. Well, back over to you, Peter, then, to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks. Councillor Baker. Just doing it. Councillor Watson, are you having challenges with the system? That is 27 votes for, that is carried.
Thank Thank you. Item 15 then is councillor appointments. Are there any changes to placings? Councillor Mellon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As a consequence of Councillor Penny's elevation to the Cabinet, he's going to come off planning, and I'd like to propose that Councillor Carter replace him on the Planning Committee.
Okay. Okay. Can we have a second for that, please? Councillor Over. Yes, thank you. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote then on that. So we'll now ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, that vote is now in progress. Councillors for... That is 27 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. Item 16 then. This is motions on notice, and we've received a motion on notice from Councillor Harry Richardson. Could I invite Councillor Richardson to move the motion? You have 5 minutes, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know that this motion was slightly misreported in the press, so for clarity, this motion opposes phasing out private landlords, in case that was in any doubt. This motion is something that goes to the heart of how people live in mid-Suffolk, the homes they rent, the choices they have, and the stability they rely on. This motion is not abstract. It's about the very real homes that thousands of our residents live in. Young couples saving for a deposit, families between moves, key workers on temporary contracts, students starting out, and older residents seeking flexible retirement living options. It complements social housing and home ownership too, and it helps us meet diverse and changing needs. Private landlords play a vital role in this. They provide choice where social housing cannot immediately meet demand, and they offer flexibility where home ownership is not yet possible or not the right option. They bring homes to the market quickly, often more quickly than public provision can, and they ensure a diversity of housing across our towns and villages. If we undermine that role, we risk losing both the quality and the quantity of homes available to our residents. And let's be clear, the economics are simple. If you reduce the supply of homes to rent while demand remains steady, rents will rise. Scarcity does not help tenants, it harms them. It means fewer homes to choose from, higher rents, and more uncertainty when landlords are pushed to sell up. That is not stability, and that is not affordability. We should also remember the investments that private landlords bring. They maintain and improve properties, from insulation and boilers to roofs and kitchens, and they do so without calling on public funds in the overwhelming majority of instances. We should be working in partnership with good landlords, not pushing them out. The private rented sector also supports our local economy. It sustains letting agents, tradespeople, maintenance firms, cleaners, decorators, and small businesses. Weakening the rented sector undermines those livelihoods and reduces opportunities for apprentices and local firms. Housing policies, we know, has a ripple effect, and we must choose those that sustain our economy, not damage it. And let us not forget the tenants themselves. Many young people actively choose renting because it gives them flexibility. Students, young professionals, families in transitions, and workers in the construction sector, one of our largest local employers, all rely on that flexibility. Renting, in many of these instances, is not a second best option for them, it is the right option for their circumstances. I've experienced that myself. I'm happy to stand corrected if I'm wrong about this, but I'm reasonably confident I'm the only councillor in this chamber who's still in their 20s. So I've experienced this myself relatively recently. For people my age, the private rented sector is crucial for flexibility and independence. We also know that our own housing revenue account is under pressure. We cannot credibly promise that public provision alone will meet every need. A balanced housing system with social housing, private renting, and home ownership is the realistic and responsible approach. Undermining one pillar will not strengthen the others, it will only strain them. That is why this motion matters. It guarantees that we will not introduce policies designed to reduce the proportion of privately rented homes in mid-Suffolk. It makes clear that any policy should focus on increasing private home ownership, not expanding state ownership at the expense of rental supply. It commits us to declining schemes that would reduce the number of homes available to rent unless there are exceptional circumstances. It gives a clear statement of intent. But supporting this motion does not mean tolerating poor practice. We support action to enforce standards, protect tenants, and deal firmly with rogue landlords. But we must also protect the good landlords who provide safe, warm, and well-maintained homes for our residents. Because ultimately, this is not an ideological motion, it's a practical one. It seeks to protect tenants by protecting choice. It seeks to protect affordability by protecting supply. And it seeks to protect our local economy by safeguarding the jobs and businesses that depend on a healthy rented sector. So let's back a balanced housing system that works for real people in real time. And let's vote for stability, for choice, and for common sense. I'm happy to propose this motion and thank Councillor Whitehead for agreeing to second it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Whitehead, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, please, Chair.
Okay, so we'll now open up the debate. Just a reminder, members have 3 minutes each. Who would like to begin the debate? Councillor Matheson.
Yes, it's a pity it has to be me again, but there. I don't think this is a good motion at all. There's just one historical factor just set out. The balance between the three housing sectors of owner-occupation, council and housing association and private rental, the balance between those sectors has shifted dramatically over recent decades since the right to buy was introduced. And much of the right to buy has actually ended up as in the private rental sector, which is not particularly a good thing to happen. So, basic problem, Councillor Richardson's ideology has wiped away the basic facts about housing and economics, and it's just left confusion, which is all I can read here. And so right to buys continue to reduce council housing stock. The replacements of that fell short year by year by year, and council house building has been reduced to a fraction of what it is actually needed over that time as well. So the right to buy and buy to let have hugely expanded the private rental sector over the same period, but rents have soared beyond inflation while housing conditions have decayed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for bringing this motion, because I think it's long overdue that we've actually had the chance to debate housing rentals and social housing. So why are we here? Let's look at the root cause of why you've brought this motion. You've brought this motion because there isn't enough social housing. That's why this motion is here. So, let's talk about why. One of the root causes of why we don't have enough social housing is because today over 2 million have been sold on the right to buy scheme. And today's value of those 2 million houses is £430 billion. So great, we've got £430 billion to play with, right? Well, no, we don't actually, because we sold £430 billion worth of houses for £51 billion. So that's a net loss of £379 billion gone into the ether, gone via discounts. Just think of what we could have done with those 2 million houses and all of that money. But we're left with 51 billion. We did not replace those 2 million houses with a further 2 million houses. And the ones we did replace, if you look into the statistics, we got rid of lots of 2 and 3 bedroom houses, but we replaced them with lots of 1 bedroom houses. So actually, when you look at the net loss of 2 million houses, but then even more bedrooms is what we lost. Why do we do this? Well, it's the 1980, rent to buy scheme introduced by Margaret Thatcher, God bless her, and it was and you look at the privatisation of British Telecom, 3.9 billion. Look at the privatisation of British Rail, 5 billion. Dwarfed in comparison, the biggest single privatisation project in Britain were these social houses. And we just haven't done what the original scheme, what it was laid out to do. We haven't done that with it, with that 51 billion. You know, if you look at it, we sold them at a ninth of what they were worth. And we could not replace those houses because of the punitive measures that were imposed on councils. They had only 3 years to spend that money. They could only spend up to 30% of the value of a house could come from right to buy. So that is why we're here debating it. And I guess what I say to him is, what is his plan to replace those 2 million houses? Because he's mentioned housing revenue. Well, councils borrowed 29 billion back in the day to pay the mortgage for these houses. They still owe 29 billion. Some have paid them off, some have taken more debt, but no one, that 29 billion has actually remained since 2012. So he's mentioned the housing revenue account, but it was his party that brought it in. It was his party that brought in right to buy. So we are in this position with all these private rents because we have eroded these 2 million council houses. So what is his plan to get these houses back? Because we can't afford to buy them, so what's his plan?
Who would like to speak next? Okay, well, I don't see any... Oh, I do now, sorry. You have to get your hands up quicker, otherwise I'll go to the next. Councillor Linders, and then Councillor Lawrence, and then Councillor Hart.
This debate makes me wonder a bit. It's claimed that people buy their social housing and then rent them out. That means that they must be living elsewhere themselves. And that leads me to think that perhaps these people didn't actually need a social housing at all in the first place. So that is a problem that also needs to be explored. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I don't know anybody who can prove anything with numbers, of course. But it was my belief that one of the main reasons why the right to buy was brought in was because councils couldn't afford the predicted maintenance on an ageing housing stock. So it depends on which papers you read at the time, I guess, and what you absorb. So it wasn't really brought in necessarily to benefit anyone except at that time the councils to offload decrepit old housing stock. Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
I was actually putting my hand up to show that other people had their hands up.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Hicks.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Councillor Patrick, for your praise of Margaret Thatcher. I think, actually, if we actually look at this motion, probably the reason it's actually come here is because of the leader of the Green Party and the motion that went through wanting to abolish private landlords. And I think it's worth noting that 19% of all people in this country live with private landlords, and actually private landlords add a lot. So I think the Green idea of abolishing private landlords actually would be really difficult for lots of people who find the private sector actually a really good place to find accommodation, because actually the private sector can provide real flexibility when you need it. And actually it's probably only the private sector that can do that, and private landlords. So I think it's also worth reflecting on, obviously, the investment, the maintenance and all the contracts and all the employment that brings, agents who are dealing with the marketplace and helping provide accommodation for people. So I think it's a bigger picture. So I think actually it's probably in large part because of the Green motion to stop private landlords is probably one of the main reasons this has come forward. But I do support this motion.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry that I didn't mention earlier in the meeting for not being able to stand this evening.
That's fine. That's fine.
I just wanted to say that housing is a big, complex issue that national government doesn't yet have the answers for. There are many aspects of demand and supply. I can't see how this directly relates to why we are discussing this motion. where the councillor Richardson was a little bit more eloquent in his speech, it doesn't actually translate to the motion in question, which is itemising things that are not real. And for me, I cannot entertain this motion because I like to deal in what's actually happening. So for me, this is esoteric, and I will not vote for this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, you wish to speak now?
Yes, this time I do. So, background of my life, this is latent to this motion. I was born in a council property. I was lived there until my parents inherited money and right to buy. They bought that property. That was sold off and eventually became private owned private rental. When I first became disabled and had to come here, I went onto social housing list and gateway to home choice, and spent 7 years waiting for that for property. In which case, I had to rely on a private renter, one of the only individuals who would actually accept somebody on housing benefit on a private rental, because private rental prices are astronomical because they have the ability to rise the prices. There's very few people who take people who actually are on a situation that I was in and have been in. Unfortunately, that landlord ended up the property having no heating for a lot of the year, black mould, and I was in that situation for a number of years before I eventually did manage to get onto a social property by again having to go through a system. Now, if this motion was regarding gateway to home choice and the issues and the vulnerabilities in there on how easy it has been for certain individuals to skip the system, which does happen, and detailed on how to ensure that the correct housing is focused on the correct individuals, or how to improve on our housing stock so we actually have housing stock where we have properties that are suitable for individuals to actually have the correct adaptations and for places actually for people to individuals to live. Unfortunately, this doesn't, and it appears to be a motion for the sake of a headline than a motion that actually will improve on people's lives, especially who do end up in a situation where they need a social property, where they won't have the money. Because I'm sure lottery wins do happen, inheritance where it comes to does happen, but it's far and few between. Even if I have inheritance, I will never be able to, on the rung to actually get a property. And there are individuals in the same case who will never be in a situation to own their own property, even with right to buy. So this does not aid anybody if it's actually to improve our housing and make sure that everyone who needs a house has a property, everyone who can actually in a situation where it's going to help, then I would support. But unfortunately, I won't be. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Winch.
Yeah, I must admit, I do find this motion quite opaque. It's sort of like attacking a headline in the Daily Mail or something. But I want to start by saying there's obviously a lot of good landlords. There's a lot of people who want to rent in the private sector. But the housing system has got massively out of kilter. And I think we all need to recognise that. So if you're just expanding on what Councillor Matheson said, council housing since the 80s has dropped from 30% of the population to under 6%. And whilst you guys were in government, you sold off 5 times as many houses as you built. There's 1.3 million people on the waiting list. So what has happened is a lot of people who would have got a council house have been forced into the private rental sector. The other thing that's happened is that buying a house has become increasingly unaffordable. So from 2010 to 2024, the ratio of house prices to average income went up from 6.9 to 8.3. There was actually a 5% decline in home ownership. So what's happened again is a lot of young people who would have wanted to buy a home have been forced into the private rental sector. At the same time, the private rental sector has grown like topsy, 50% in the period of the last set of Conservative governments. and is not very affordable housing. So if you, of the lowest quartile of earners in private rental are spending nearly 65% of their earnings on housing costs. It's also got the lowest standard of housing of all the tenure types, so over 25% are non-decent homes. So we have to look at how it doesn't mean that all private rental is bad, but we really have to look at how the market has got completely out of kilter. Now, the Renters' Rights Bill that is going through Parliament, started by Conservatives, is one attempt to address that. But there's all sorts of other things that we need to do to see if we can get a more regulated market. The thing I would concede is that Conservatives have been successful in decimating state housing. The problem is it's made the housing in our country worse, not better. It's made the housing system less affordable. So we know that an unregulated private sector market doesn't work because we've experimented with it when you were in government, when you had 16 housing ministers in 14 years. So I think what we need to do is have a look at what things we could do to get that market back into a more sensible state, because otherwise we're never going to make progress on this housing problem.
Councillor Caston.
Yeah, essentially I think this is about how absolutely terrible this idea is. From what I understand, at the conference, they said we'd like to get rid of private rentals slowly over a period of time. And we talked a bit about basic economics. All it's going to do is it's going to make houses scarcer. There's going to be more competition over the houses that are available, and it's going to put rents up. It's going to disproportionately affect low-income renters, young professionals, and people that need to be flexible. If you were ever going to do it, you would have to do so much to mitigate all the incredible damage it would do. We've spoken a bit about right to buy, and I know right to buy has had its problems, but how can we be so against something that, so in this country, lots of people buy a house. They buy a house when their parents give them a deposit. They give them some money. They couldn't buy a house without doing that. We've got a scheme where people that don't have that inheritance money passed over to them to buy the house can buy their own house. They can then live in a private house. They can pay off the mortgage, and when it comes round, they don't have rent to pay, so they can, after that, they can help their children to buy houses. It solves ever such a lot of problems. We've got to replace the housing stock. The problem is not replacing the housing stock as we do it. But if you want to talk about levelling up, right to buy is an incredible mechanism for levelling up. But I will support the motion.
Councillor Penny.
Yeah, I don't. This motion has three separate parts. The first part does seem to be an attack on right to buy. And I don't think members on this House per se are opposed to a right to buy scheme as individuals, all being well. But all is really not well in the housing market. The housing market is sick. Since the right to buy scheme has been introduced, restrictions have been placed on local authorities which make it harder to build and replace the council housing that is being sold off. In 24-25, 2,260 council homes were built. 13,966 of these were sold off as council homes through the right to buy scheme. Very, very few of those became rental schemes. So this argument is a red herring in the rental market. Council house building is in absolute crisis. I could tell stories from my own family who were saved by council houses being available, and it was a real struggle. But I don't need to go there. And I think the ability to provide council housing for those who are truly in need should take priority over any right to buy scheme and the enthusiasms of and the ambitions of local landlords. And I can't see at this time that the right to buy scheme should take precedence. I think the building of council homes needs to take precedence over all other schemes, quite frankly. At Mid-Suffolk, this is the direction we want to take. Councillor Richardson used the word undermined, and I think this is what has happened to our council housing provision. Such services as those are great and to be applauded and not perceived as bad.
Thank you.
Stringer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say much on this because being someone that was brought up in a council house and hearing the debate, I thought I needed to bring some clarity to this. I have to say, this is one of the most confusing motions I've ever read in 22 years. Because people are talking about a motion at a conference, but it's not in the motion. It's using terms that mean something in a dictionary, but you're using a different meaning tonight. And I think that's deliberate, and I'll explain why. I just want to cover off something that Councillor Lawrence said. You said the original aim of selling off council houses was to get rid of the ones that needed doing up, and then you're left with all the ones that are wonderful. Precisely the opposite happened. No one triggered the right to buy on something that was clapped out and needed renovation. You creamed off the best of the stock into private ownership, leaving the councils with the dregs, which meant their bills went up, and then some genius said we had to buy them all back again. So we then had to take a mortgage out to buy what we were left with. Absolute hollowing out of the social housing service in this country by political diktat, and anyone that was involved in that should be ashamed of themselves. And we're now trying to pick up the pieces. What's really interesting, I just want to focus on item 2 of this resolution. And if you vote for this, be very clear what you're voting for. A right to buy scheme, right to buy is, quote, a government scheme that allows eligible council tenants to purchase their home at a discount. That's what right to buy means. That's what it means in this motion. So if you agree with item 2, decline to participate in any council right to buy scheme that reduces supply in the local private housing market. Well, that's all the development that we take off new development. It's all the houses we take into our stock from those new housing estates. So if you vote for this, you are voting for this council never to take another house from a private developer. We promised in all of our planning policies that we will take up to 35%. I'm going to stand up for that up to 35%. I will not be voting for this resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan. No? Okay. Anyone else wish to speak before I go to Councillor Whitehead, who reserved their right to speak? Okay. Councillor Whitehead, you reserved your right.
Thank you, Chair. For several years now, I've been concerned that private landlords appear to be in the firing line with a tsunami of increased regulations, stringent new tenant rights, along with imposition of higher costs and higher taxation. At the start of the meeting, I declared an interest in a private landlord. I think it's best that I should put that perhaps into some historical perspective. I've lived with my parents, I've lived in university halls, I've lived with both friends and strangers in private rented accommodation, and I've also rented a room from a friend. And that history just covers the first 30 years of my life. I've since owned and lived in mortgage properties before now owning outright in retirement. Along the way, I became first a reluctant landlord. When a flat I couldn't sell without taking a big loss, I then let out, and more latterly, becoming a landlord of choice. So that describes the life of just one individual, me. Take 10,000 people at random, and you get 10,000 different property life stories. Even someone as young as young Harry here. Yes, there would be common themes, but each story would be unique. So I told my wife yesterday, I said I needed to write a council speech seconding a motion concerning private landlords. She gave me a quizzical look. So I explained that nationally, the Green Party at their recent conference had voted to abolish private landlords. She point blank refused to believe me. Surely fake news. Well, iPad in hand, I quickly typed into Google, Green leader wants to abolish private landlords, and I showed her the top hit. It was a BBC website, headlined, Greens back plans to abolish private landlords. And that article of the 6th of October went on to say, the Green Party has committed itself to phasing out private landlords from the housing system. And it's had, 14 days for BBC Verified to look at that. Anyway, after reading that article, I can't remember exact words in reply, but suffice to say they were probably not fit and proper for me to repeat in this chamber. Without a private landlord, our son would be homeless in London, she then added. Another headline in this Google search read, Green Party vote to abolish private landlords, followed by this quote, landlords add no positive value to the economy or society and are intrinsically exploitative. Well, I'm not going to spend time now arguing against that statement because I believe Councillor Richardson has set out within the wordings of the motion coherent and well-presented counter-arguments that we've all had a week to read and ponder. But, Chair, I'm happy to second this motion, which has 6 paragraphs of beliefs and opinions included within it. And I welcome it as an opportunity to see if our local Green members are all likewise wedded to their new national party policy, because I believe our residents deserve to know where our local elected representatives stand on this crucial matter. Yeah, a matter which affects many of our residents, whether private tenants or private landlords. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now invite Councillor Richardson as a mover of the motion to sum up and close the debate. You have 3 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I should start by saying I think some of this confusion is slightly confected. Let me read, and I think there's been a little bit of back and forth over exactly the wording of what the Greens are now proposing at a national level. I'll read it to you, and this is not from the Daily Mail, this is from the BBC, who said a motion passed at its party conference at the weekend called for the party to, and I quote, seek the effective abolition of private landlordism. And that's a quote from the motion, not a quote from the BBC. It says, this plan is now official policy for the Green Party in England and Wales. Also goes on to say, but there are currently no costings for this plan. It also said that they will set up a council right to buy scheme to purchase rental properties. That is trying to reduce the number, the raw number, not just the proportion of private rented properties. Now, the reason this is relevant to Mid-Suffolk is because Mid-Suffolk and its subsidiaries do purchase properties on the open market, both residential and commercial, and that's absolutely right, when it's appropriate under the right circumstances. We have reserves, we have the ability to borrow, we could, if we choose, seek to phase out private landlords ourselves, as Councillor Whitehead said, by acquiring let properties when they become available and taking them into public ownership. We are the local housing, statutory housing provider and the local planning authority after all. That is what this motion is about. Put simply, it is asking whether the Greens Flagship Council will implement the Greens Flagship Housing Policy. That's the job of the opposition, to hold the administration to account. So if you are voting in favour of this motion, you are effectively saying that you do want to build more houses still, because that's what the last administration did, to Councillor Patchett's point. I was a director for several years for Mid-Suffolk Growth Limited, where we did build local houses because that was the right approach to do. I don't think we should be taking out housing stock from the open market and bringing it back under the council's control. So for those reasons, I'm happy to propose this motion and will be voting in favour of it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I will now ask the Head of Democratic Services to conduct the electronic vote.
Councillors, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Hicks? 4. Councillor Petty? Councillor Pratt, we haven't got a vote registered for you yet.
Just getting there. Yeah, be there in a second, sorry.
Do you want to give it verbally or? Many thanks for your patience, councillors. That is 6 votes for and 21 against. That motion is lost.
Okay, right. Brings us to the end of the... Could I have some order, please? It brings us to the end of the meeting. The next meeting is on Thursday, the 27th of November at 5:30 p.m. and I declare this meeting closed at 7:36. Thank you all.